Hi everyone, I'm Kelly O'Horo, and this is Adaptable Behavior Explained. Hi everybody, thanks so much for tuning in today and welcome back to Adaptable. You know that you're here listening to the podcast where we explore how the human system, our mind, body, and our nervous system all work together and how we learn to adapt and how we can heal in this rapidly changing, very busy world that's full of so much chaos and overcommitment. I'm Kelly, and today we're diving into something that touches every single one of us, and that's the nervous system. How it works, how stress and trauma shape it, and how we can actually rewire our brains to help us become more adaptive rather than consistently remaining overwhelmed. And who doesn't want more of that? In all the stress that we experience in our life, we want to understand that our nervous system is not broken. It's doing exactly what it learned to do to keep you safe. And oftentimes, what kept you safe then may be exhausting to you now. So now we're going to break it down a little bit into some more digestible bites. In today's episode, we're going to learn how the nervous system actually works in simple human terms, not science jargon, and how stress and trauma get stored in our body, in our brains, and how those reactions that were thwarted in time, our ability to cry, to scream, to shove, to push, to run, anything that we needed to do when we couldn't do that or be even nurtured gets a little bit locked in our nervous system. And so we want to work on learning how we can change that. We're going to talk about why unresolved stress can impact our long-term health and how our relationship with stress changes its effects. We're going to talk a little bit about how therapy like EMDR helps to rewire the brain, and most importantly, how healing and adaptability from whatever it is that you learned growing up are actually possible. So let's dig in. The nervous system, complicated, very important, our survival system. And I'd like to teach you a little bit about the basics. If you haven't been watching from season 1, I went over this a little bit in a How We Work episode back in season 1. But I'm going to give you a little bit of a review so that you have it fresh in your mind. Your nervous system has a primary job, and that's the only thing that it has to do, and that's to keep you alive. It is constantly scanning the environment for safety or threat, and it responds automatically, often before you're even consciously aware. Our nervous system is autonomic, just like your heartbeat, just like blinking. We don't try to think about doing those things. We don't try to breathe when we're sleeping. This just happens. And something that's an important distinction related to our nervous system, it's always scanning for threat, but sometimes it doesn't have it right as far as what it perceives as threat or danger versus true safety. At a high level, what we're talking about is this autonomic nervous system. We've got our sympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for fight, flight, and freeze, and submit when danger is just too imminent and we're too small or too little or in too much shock to do anything about it. And then we've got our parasympathetic nervous system, which is part of rest and digest and repair. And so stress isn't the enemy, unresolved stress is. And so I want to show you a little bit of a visual representation. So for those of you who are just listening, you might want to jump over to the YouTube channel if you want to see how this goes, but you might be able to just imagine it, and that's okay too. So I'm going to show you this awesome representation of our limbic system and our brain, and you can follow along. So go ahead and hold up your hand like a fist, and we're going to tuck our thumb in. That's going to be our amygdala. Our wrist represents the spinal cord, and our palm is the brainstem and the limbic system, our parasympathetic, our sympathetic nervous system, and our amygdala. And our amygdala is our body's alarm system, and it is constantly scanning, what do I see, taste, feel, sense, touch, and what do I perceive as danger or safety? And when it alarms the body, the prefrontal cortex, this is the part of the brain that is responsible for reasonable, rational, logical problem solving in our lives, it goes completely offline, or like Dan Siegel would say, we flip our lid. So let me give you an example. Our amygdala scans and it smells smoke. And so it senses threat. Our prefrontal cortex goes right offline. And now we're just straight limbic going, what do I need to do to preserve or survive in this moment of threat? And in that, We freeze, we flee, we fight, or we shut all the way down. And so we want to make sure that we get our prefrontal cortex back online before we can do anything that's reasonable or logical. And our brain is designed this way because if we were slow enough to think, like if we saw a ball crossing the road when we were driving and we thought, gee, I better slow down, otherwise I might hit the child that is likely chasing this ball, it's too slow. So what do? We see a ball, we slam on the brakes because our prior knowledge says likely after a ball, perhaps a child is chasing that ball, and we don't want to be someone who hits a child with our car. And so what happens is our prefrontal cortex is in fact 1 million times faster than anything that we can accomplish with our rational thought. And that's by design to keep our bodies safe and to protect others from harm if we're in a position to do that. And so I love using this reference because it gives us a visual cue that says, is your lid flipped? Were you in stress? Were you in your prefrontal cortex when you were in that argument? Was your partner? Or were you both trying to work through something with both of your lids slipped, at which point we have no listener, we have no audience, and we even have no way to take in the data that's coming in. And this is the way that we are built. And like I said, it's for survival. Our brain takes over to protect our species, and it is not a weakness. It's just the biology of our build. So now we're going to talk about trauma, stress, and the body and how it's impacted. Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris wrote the book, The Deepest Well, and in that book, she explains how toxic stress, especially if it's early in life, can recalibrate our nervous system in a way that isn't useful. And so we have to do a lot to help recalibrate if we are wired for stress and wired for constant danger or threat. And so if stress is severe, meaning anything major happened, serious loss, neglect, abandonment, abuse, violence, so anything that's severe will create intense stress. If it's ongoing or chronic, meaning not just one thing happens in our life, but event after event after event creates stress in our body that is just ongoing, it never has a reprieve, and oftentimes it's coupled with absence of supportive relationships. So many times people grow up in homes where there's severe stress and it's chronic, and then there are not loving, nurturing caregivers to help bring that stress down after the big, hard, painful things happen. And so as a result, the body stays stuck in that survival mode. It's prepared for stress. It's scanning, what do I see, smell, feel, taste, touch, and oftentimes it's calibrated towards threat even when it doesn't exist. It's kind of like waiting for the other shoe to drop at all times. And this doesn't just affect our mood. It affects our immune function. It affects inflammation in our body. It creates changes in our hormones and our hormonal systems and the endocrine system. And over time, when we are exposed to long-term stress, we end up with long-term physical health consequences in many cases. And this isn't a broad brush generalization, but we have a study called the ACE study that really proves this phenomenon. So let me go into that just a little bit. The Adverse Childhood Experiences research, which was done out of Kaiser Permanente, it was a medical study that contained 17,000 medical participants. It showed a clear link between early adversity and an increase of risk and illness later in life. And if you think about it, it makes sense, because when our cortisol levels are high and our adrenal response is fatigued, the rest of our body takes a hit. It becomes harder for all of our other systems to remain functional at the same degree they could be if they weren't constantly inundated with our stress hormones. And it's not because people are damaged that this happens, but because our nervous systems adapted to that ongoing threat. So we remain vigilant, ready, waiting, looking for cues that substantiate our perception that there's always going to be something bad that's going to happen. And so this happens to so very many of us. I don't really know anybody with an ACE score lower than about a 3. And I think if we dig a little more deeply, we can oftentimes find greater stresses associated with people's stories, even when they're underreported. So we have options, right? We can just reframe stress and talk about how it's not always the villain. And that is useful for perspective changing, but it doesn't necessarily address the nervous system's function. we do have a lot of opportunity when it comes to learning, because stress is actually an important thing if it's not chronic and persistent. There is an awesome TED Talk that I love by Kelly McGonigal where she talks about our relationship with stress being the most important factor, because if you think about it, anxiety and stress is what prevents us from failing. It's what motivates us to do a better job. It's what gets us to follow through with our homework and our responsibilities with our job, or assisting the people that we care about. We don't want to fail at those things. And so that kind of stress teaches us that it helps us to motivate ourselves for future change. But Kelly McGonigal teaches us that how we perceive stress can change how it actually impacts our bodies. And so that's really fascinating when you think about that. So when stress is viewed as a sign of care, or when it's seen as a mobilization of energy where you get this burst of power and adrenaline that says move toward or do something to make your life better or change it, or if it's like a response to something meaningful. So for example, if you're in like a graduate program or you're in college and you're working hard to succeed in your coursework, but you know that at the end of that, you've got a potential career that's going to serve you or your family and give you, more meaning in your professional development, that stress actually serves you. So when you think about it and have gratitude for that stress because it's propelling you towards something you want, then that's helpful because the body responds differently to that perception of stress being supportive or helpful. Stress hormones can actually improve our focus and help us remain dialed in when we need to. Stress hormones can increase our resilience. It can enhance our connection. And so there's benefits to the stress hormones. It's not about eliminating stress, it's about changing our relationship with it. So there's two factors involved. We've got the biomechanics of the brain and how it's wired for threat and how our amygdala can perceive danger and stress when it doesn't exist. And then we have the opportunity to start to recalibrate how we interface with stress. What does stress mean? And how do we shift our perspective so that our body benefits from that perspective shift? So let's talk a little bit more about the brain and how the brain rewires is related to a concept called neuroplasticity. Our brain is not fixed, and the younger we are, the more flexible or plastic our brain is, the less rigidity that it has. And through neuroplasticity, the brain can create new pathways. The way I describe this to my clients is if you think about if you've ever been camping and you're off in the dirt roads and you're driving down the path, there's a propensity where water has gone from weather, and then where tire tracks have created paths that are well worn, where your tires just go in those paths. And so when we've had a habit in our brain that goes down those paths that are well rutted pathways, we can create new pathways or a diversion from the typical path that our brain wants to take. Because what fires together wires together in the way our brain responds to data in our environment. And so we can weaken our old survival responses through specific things like meditation, yoga, EMDR therapy, and now several different psychedelic assisted therapies are showing tremendous promise in the rewiring of the neuroplasticity and changing patterns and pathways because they're incredibly neurogenic. So our brains can learn safety again if we proactively go toward the healing that is part of how that works. So this is where trauma-informed therapies come in. Now, many of you who've been watching for a few seasons know that I'm an EMDR therapist, I'm an approved consultant, and I'm a trainer. And so my bias very much leans towards EMDR as a foundational approach to the way that we can heal. Now, this doesn't mean we exclude other things. It just means that if we can combine other things with EMDR therapy, we can more efficiently help the brain to reprocess traumatic memories or things that happened in younger times of our lives that kind of get a little bit stuck in that time developmentally, emotionally, and socially. So instead of reliving trauma as if it's happening now, because trauma is very much a time orientation issue, EMDR helps the brain to integrate a memory that happened in the past with today's more adaptive information so it holds. It reduces emotional charge and it stores it as something that happened, not as something that is still happening. Now, some people are concerned that with EMDR you forget what happened, and that's not true. It just doesn't hold the same emotional charge as it once did, which the body then benefits from when you think about the nervous system. Because what happens is the amygdala calms down. It doesn't perceive threat everywhere that it scans in the world, because it recalibrates the wiring so that we can start to see threat when there is threat, as opposed to see threat when there isn't threat. And then the prefrontal cortex comes back online much more quickly, which increases our space between our reaction to our space between the stimulus and our response, making it more of a positive reaction that fits today's circumstances as opposed to a maladaptive reaction. It doesn't erase the memory, it changes how our body responds to the stimulus in our environment. And so a lot of us need to work to reset our nervous system, because today's world is constantly inundating us with stimulus. We can't go anywhere without lights and computers and phones and apps. And I mean, we can't even really go to restaurants anymore without interaction with apps. I mean, we are constantly inundated and overwhelmed with stimulus and environmental cues that draw our attention. And so we're not living in a slow society like we once were. There's also chronic uncertainty in today's current situation. Geopolitically, we've got a lot of instability and uncertainty, creating stress, very frequently, especially if you're someone who watches the news. We're not in a time where we have a lot of recovery time. We go, go, go. We don't offer ourselves rest. We judge rest, and we don't understand and put into practice habits like relax and rest as part of our healthy way of being. And so adaptation today requires intentional regulation. We've got to really understand that this happens, and then we've got to do things proactively, building into our schedule that introduces rest. And this includes safe relationships, people that you can connect with on a regular basis and talk about the stresses in your life and be in connection, which in healthy relationships we can co-regulate with one another. I've got several shows on coping skills, and we want to introduce body-based practices. These can be meditation, these can be yoga practices, this can be breath work, but being in the stillness. A prayer is another way that people often bring into body the invitation to slow down and to be introspective and to be more present with self. We've got to change the way we look at the concept of rest. We shouldn't be feeling guilty when we rest. We need to understand that as a healthy way to interface with our life's pressures and our life's circumstances. And we need to have more self-compassion for ourselves and for others when that's not something that often happens. Healing isn't about the absence of stress. It's not about not being stressed again and living in this world of total Zen relaxation. That's not realistic for really any of us. It's about becoming flexible and responsive and more resilient. And in so doing, our body benefits, thus our nervous system benefits. Remember, our nervous system learned what it needed to survive because of our environment. And now with awareness and support, the right tools and actions and behaviors and habits, it can learn something new. We are incredibly adaptive species, and we can learn. So if this episode resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel and share this episode with someone who doesn't understand about the nervous system and their relationship with stress. And please leave a comment in our section about things you do to help maintain healthy stress levels or recalibrate your nervous system. Until next time, thank you so much for tuning in, and don't forget to lead with love. It'll never steer you wrong.